You know what time it is, Eva and Harrison and Pedro. It is time for another lesson with Mrs. H. This was supposed to be a discovery lesson, but it's kind of difficult to do with remote learning. So instead, I'm going to provide you with the answers and we'll go from there. Okay? So first of all, remember from the other video that we learned that this was the transversal. Remember that the transversal is the one that intersects both lines. That's how you know which one it is. And these arrows right here, when you see those, that means the lines are parallel. So if we have parallel lines and it is cut by the transversal, then we have some special things that happen. First, corresponding angles are congruent. Okay. Think about why that would be true. If we say angle 1 was 120 degrees and angle 5 was 60 degrees, then this angle would actually create this line to cross the other line, which means they would not be parallel. So in order for them to be parallel, they have to be the same measure. Okay, so corresponding angles are congruent. If lines are parallel, then alternate interior angles are also congruent. So for example, let's say this is 60 degrees, then angle 6 is also 60 degrees. So angle 4 is congruent to angle 6, and angle 3 is congruent to angle 5. So alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay. If lines are parallel, then alternate exterior angles are congruent. Okay, so let's say this was 100 degrees, then that would also be 100 degrees. So we would say angle 1 is congruent to angle 7, and angle 2 is congruent to angle 8. Of course, they all can't be congruent. So if lines are parallel, then same side consecutive interior angles are supplementary, meaning they add up to 180 degrees. And then if lines are parallel, then same side consecutive exterior angles are also supplementary. So corresponding alternate interior, alternate exterior are all congruent, but same side is supplementary. Think S to S. Okay, same side, supplementary. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to practice just finding values. In order to do this, you need to first identify what type of angles that you have. So this is my transversal. Okay, how do I know? It's because it's the one that's intersecting both lines, and then I know these are parallel because of those two arrows. Then I need to look at my angles and identify what type of angles that I have. Well, in this case, those are going to be corresponding angles. And what do we know about corresponding angles? We know that they're congruent. So we're going to set them equal to each other and solve for x. Okay. So we get x to equal 22. Okay. Now I need to solve for y. Well, this angle and this angle aren't anything because this is exterior, this is interior. They're not on the same side. However, remember that our rules for a linear pair or a straight angle still apply. So this right here is also going to be 180 degrees. So I'm going to do 4 times 22 plus y equals 180. Where did I get all the information again? Well, we just found x to be 22, so we have to plug it back in. And then these two angles, they create a straight angle, which means they're supplementary, so you add them up to equal 180. So we get 88 plus 22 plus y equals 180. And then 110 plus y equals 180, so y equals 70. So first identify the angles that you have, and then either see if they're corresponding or same side supplementary. Okay, so again, here is my transversal, and here are my parallel lines. Notice that there's 2 arrows on them this time, still means they're parallel. Let's identify what type of angles I have. Well, here are the 2 lines. This is on the outside, so they're going to be exterior, and they're on opposite sides of the transversal, so this is going to be congruent. So let's write down what type of angles. Alternate exterior angles, and alternate exterior angles are congruent. So 2x minus 135 equals x minus 30. So we get x to equal 105. Okay, now we need to find y, and there's actually 2 ways we could do this problem. One, noticing that these angles are corresponding angles. They are in the same location with respect to the transversal. Okay, or you might have noticed that these are vertical angles, and what do we know about vertical angles? They are also congruent. So it doesn't matter which way you approach this. I'm just going to do that corresponding angles are congruent since the math is faster. So y equals 75. All right, let's go ahead and do another example. Remember, the first thing you need to do is identify what type of angles you have. So this is the transversal. The transversal is the one that goes through both lines. And then these lines are parallel. How do we know that? Because of these arrows. So these are going to be same side exterior. Why are they same side exterior? Well, first of all, we are working outside the parallel lines, and we're working on the same side of the transversal. So that would be same side. And remember, SS. So same side means they add up to 180 degrees because they are supplementary. And then we just solve from there. So 5x equals 185, and x equals 37 then. So we still need to find y, okay? Again, there's 2 ways you could do this problem. You can notice that we have alternate exterior angles, and we know that alternate exterior angles are congruent. Or you could do that these 2 are supplementary because they create a straight angle. But going along of our special lines and angles, I'm going to use that alternate exterior angles are congruent. So 2x plus 10 equals y. Plug in 37. And you get y to equal 84. Okay. All right, let's next page. We'll save this problem for class, so we're going to skip this for right now. And we're going to go to question 15. So it says, put any additional markings, congruence markings, and determine what possibly prove the triangle is congruent. So again, going back to marking angles, marking what you have congruent is so important. So first of all, we have that this side is congruent to this side. Okay. We also have the reflexive property. Okay. Now what we're going to take a look at is that these lines are parallel, and this would be the transversal. So what do we know about parallel lines? That when you have alternate interior angles, they are congruent. So alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and mark. So I have a side, angle, side. So you could prove this congruent by SAS. Okay, this type of using the parallel lines comes up quite a bit. Okay, in the next example, we have that these angles are congruent, and these sides are congruent. Okay. Parallel lines. This is the transversal. So what else could we mark? Again, alternate interior angles are congruent. So it's on the inside of the transversal, so alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay. Mark what you have. So we have angle, angle, side. Okay, let's apply this proof. Okay, so first of all, it says LA is parallel to SN. So let's go ahead and mark that as my two parallel lines. So LA is parallel to SN. I'm going to draw little arrows to represent that they're parallel, which means then my transversal is this line. Okay, so let's go ahead and write that as our given. So LA is parallel to SN, and those are the symbols for parallel, by the way. And R is the midpoint of LN. Okay. All right. So remember that if you are given midpoint, median, altitude, bisect, or perpendicular, you need to break it down. So let's break down that R is the midpoint. If R is the midpoint of LN, that means LR is congruent to NR by the definition of a midpoint. Okay. All right, so we don't have any other givens that I can break down, so I need to start looking at my diagram to see if there's anything from the diagram information that I can get. Anytime you have lines intersecting, you should always be looking for vertical angles. So we have angle LRA is congruent to angle NRS. So vertical angles congruent. So let's go ahead and mark that. So congruent and congruent. Then we're going to use the information we just learned about alternate interior angles are congruent. So here are my parallel lines. This is the transversal. So that means that these angles are congruent. So angle LAR is congruent to NSR. And we would say if lines parallel, and yes, you need to write this out because you're learning this for the first time, then alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay. And then let's mark the information we have. And technically, you have two transversals in this problem. Okay, so I also could have drawn there, and then I also could have said that these angles were congruent. So you can prove this by two congruence postulates, actually. You could either say AAS or ASA. Just make sure that you have the correct information. So if I were to say ASA, then I need to make sure that I had these angles listed congruent by if lines parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. So step 5, triangle ALR is congruent to triangle SNR. Okay, and the way that I did my diagram, so let's see if this will allow me to erase. That's not the eraser. Nope, it won't allow me to erase. The way that I originally did my diagram would have been by AAS. And then from there, you can say AR is congruent to SR by CPCTC. Okay. If you have questions on this proof, make sure you please ask. Okay, I know that proving it by ASA or AAS can be a little confusing. So make sure if you have questions that you ask. Okay, thanks as always for tuning in. I really appreciate it. You only have one more video after this for this chapter. Woohoo! Thank you. Goodbye.